Have you ever felt your world slowly turning to ash? A quiet, suffocating weight where the things that once brought you joy now taste like dust. Your ambitions fall flat. Your relationships feel distant. Your identity, the very story you constructed about who you are, completely dissolves. You call it depression. You call it burnout. You call it a crisis of the soul. But the ancient alchemists, working in cold, candlelit laboratories centuries ago, had another name for this terrible, heavy darkness. They called it the Nigredo, the blackening. To the medieval alchemists, the path to creating gold was never direct. They did not start with beauty, they started with decay. Before any base metal could be transmuted into the incorruptible splendor of gold, it first had to be thrown into the fire. It had to be broken down, dissolved, and reduced to its absolute basic state, what they called the prima materia, the raw, chaotic, formless material of creation. Carl Jung, walking through the dark corridors of the human mind, realized that this ancient physical process was a perfect mirror for human psychology. The Nigredo is the moment the ego shatters. It is the terrifying descent into the shadow. It is when the mask you wear for the world finally cracks, and you are forced to look at the terrifying depth of everything you have ignored, suppressed, and run from. When you see your matter going black, the old alchemical texts whisper, "Rejoice, for you are at the beginning of the work." But why should we rejoice in suffering? Why celebrate the collapse? Because the ego is a rigid structure. It builds walls to keep us safe, but those same walls eventually become a prison. We become trapped in who we think we should be, ignoring the vast, wild landscape of who we actually are. Most people spend their entire lives running from this blackness. They distract themselves with noise. They numb their pain with substances. They wear false smiles to convince themselves and others that everything is fine. They chase external achievements to quiet the internal void. But Carl Jung issued a stark warning to us all. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own souls. When you run from the Nigredo, you run from your own transformation. You choose a slow, living death over a temporary burning rebirth. If you are currently sitting in the dark, if you feel lost, heavy, and stripped of who you used to be, understand this. You are not dying. You are cooking. The fire of the Nigredo is not there to destroy you. It is there to burn away the illusion. It is consuming the false self, the social conditioning, and the outdated defenses you no longer need, so that the raw truth of your soul can finally begin to emerge. After the terrifying fire of the Nigredo has finished its brutal, destructive work, the screaming stops, the smoke clears, and what remains in the bottom of the vessel is nothing but cold, silent ash. Now, the second phase of the great work must begin. The ashes must be washed. In the absolute stillness of the alchemical laboratory, the master watches as the blackened, burnt material is carefully bathed in the aqua divina, the divine, purifying water. Slowly, stroke by stroke, the dark soot of decay dissolves into the current. The heavy, leaden weight begins to lift from the vessel, gradually revealing a pale, shimmering, and highly reflective silver surface beneath. This is the albedo, the whitening. If the Nigredo was the chaotic, suffocating storm of the dark night of the soul, then the albedo is the quiet, cool dawn that follows. It is the exact moment the rain stops, the howling wind dies down, and the cold, serene moonlight finally touches the damp earth. In the landscape of human psychology, this stage represents the birth of true self-awareness. It is the moment you stop desperately fighting your shadow and simply begin to observe it. The water that washes the soul is nothing more than conscious reflection. It is the long, difficult, and quiet work of learning to recognize your own patterns, your hidden wounds, and your unconscious projections. When we are trapped in the blackness of our suffering, our instinct is to project our pain outward onto others. We blame the external world. We blame our partners, our childhoods, our employers, or our bad luck. But when we enter the silver light of the albedo, we wash those illusions away. We look directly into the mirror of the soul, and recognize a profound, life-altering truth: that the enemy we have been desperately fighting out there is actually a wounded, neglected part of ourselves in here. In this stage, the screaming chaos of your mind begins to quiet down. You no longer react to your daily triggers with blind panic, defensive walls, or destructive rage. Instead, you step back. You take a breath. You observe. You realize that your anger is not a monster to be slain, but a protective boundary that has been violated. You realize your anxiety is not a defect to be cured, but an internal alarm system begging you to pay attention to your life. This is the birth of the inner observer, the part of you that does not judge, does not panic, and does not run. It simply watches with the cool, silver clarity of the moon. Here, in the peace of the Albedo, the alchemist spoke of the conjunctio, the divine marriage of the soul. It is a sacred meeting place where the king and the queen, the light of conscious awareness and the dark waters of the unconscious shadow, finally look at each other without fear. They realize they are not enemies, but two halves of a single, magnificent whole. The heavy, active suffering of the descent is over. The impurities have been washed away. The soul has finally found its peace. But peace is not yet wholeness. To simply watch life from a safe, detached distance is not enough. The silver must still become gold. The final crowning stage of the great work is the Rubedo, the reddening. The old masters believed that after the cool, quiet purification of the silver, the silent peace of the laboratory was not the end. The work was not yet complete. The fires of the furnace must be stoked once more, this time to their absolute maximum, white-hot intensity. A single drop of living blood is introduced to the sealed vessel. Suddenly, the white, quiet ash begins to blush, turning a deep, vibrant, and fiery red. This is the birth of the Philosopher's Stone, the final, triumphant completion of the magnum opus, the great work of the self. To Carl Jung, the Rubedo is the ultimate integration of the human psyche. It is crucial to understand that this is not an escape from the world. It is not about floating away into a quiet, passive state of spiritual avoidance where nothing can touch you, hurt you, or move you. True psychological wholeness is never found by staying forever in the cool, silver isolation of the albedo. You cannot live your life as a mere spectator, hiding in quiet meditation to avoid the friction of reality. The Rubedo is the passionate, active, and courageous return to the chaotic world. In the albedo, you found peace by stepping back and observing your life. In the Rubedo, you find wholeness by stepping forward and living it fully, bringing both your light and your dark with you into every room you enter. You do not leave your shadow behind in the dark. You carry its immense, raw power into the light. You do not pretend to be a saint. You choose instead to be whole. In this triumphant state, you no longer reject your shadow. You harness its primal energy. You no longer repress your anger. You direct its fierce, protective strength to build healthy boundaries, to stand up for yourself, and to fight for what is right. Your anger ceases to be a wildfire that burns your house down, and instead becomes a controlled engine that drives you forward. You no longer fear your deep sensitivity or your capacity to feel pain. You embrace it as the ultimate source of your creativity, your intuition, your art, and your empathy. You do not kill the beast within you. You learn to ride it. This is the phoenix rising from its own ashes, stronger, wiser, and completely unbroken. By allowing your suffering to be cooked in the fire of consciousness and washed in the deep, quiet waters of self-reflection, you have achieved the ultimate inner transmutation. You have turned the heavy, useless lead of your pain into the immortal, brilliant gold of conscious wisdom. The Philosopher's Stone is not a physical rock. It is an unshakable, indestructible center within yourself. It is a state of being where you can no longer be easily manipulated, broken, or swayed by the storms of the external world, because you have already faced, negotiated with, and integrated the storm inside. When you possess the stone, you no longer look to others for validation because you know exactly who you are. You no longer fear the dark because you have walked through its deepest corridors and returned with the light. The division is over. The civil war within your mind has finally ceased. You are no longer a collection of broken, scattered, and warring pieces. You are whole. The great work is finished.